Your phone's singing.
Oh, it sure is.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. I
It's
didn't
your
even
trailer-
realize.
Trailer park game.
Oh, yeah, I was hanging out with my park friends. Yeah. It's so bad. It's terrible.
They love you. Trailer.
I don't know.
What's the name of the game?
I don't know.
Trailer
park.
Like Farmville, but for trailer
Right.
parks and drug dealers.
Yeah. Yeah. There's all kinds of weird in there.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
So,
Hi.
hi. How are you?
Good. I'm a little overwhelmed with
Are you?
my papers right now.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I know.
I thought mine was bad.
I know.
When I started doing all mine, I started putting them together. I'm like, shoot, I got to cut some out. And you decided to double the amount that I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have about 11 pages worth of stuff. I'm not going to
Yeah.
go over all 11 pages. I promise, because I want to eat dinner at some point tonight.
Yeah, that's
But,
you could probably make a book out of the amount of notes you have.
yeah. Well, okay. So what I'm going to be talking about, it started, it's just such a broad topic of like
Right.
prison reform or like wrongfully convicted. And there's just, there's so much information. So I've had to kind of try and narrow it down. There's still going to be a lot of numbers and a lot of statistics, and I'm going to have to read quite a bit just because my brain is mush right now. So, what I decided to do, and we've heard about this because you've been a trooper and watched a lot of criminal things with me, and
I do enjoy most of them.
yeah, and I don't watch as much as I used to. I think I even got to a point where I was a little overwhelmed with murder. So, what I decided to do is focus a little bit more specifically in the Innocence Project because they deal specifically with exonerations. And
Right.
going through some of the numbers, I feel like it had the most up-to-date information, and a lot of it was based around DNA. So I'm just going to jump right into it.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a topic though that we've actually in a different manner discussed before.
Yeah,
Yeah. and
because it is really crazy the amount of numbers. Like,
right. Yeah. This is not new for us. This is something we looked at when we did the podcast originally.
right, a couple years ago we talked about it.
Different form of it, but still along the same lines. And it's super deep. It's complex when you get in the
Well,
legal system.
And
so-
science is always changing. So, I mean, somebody that did a crime and was convicted 10 years ago, it's
Mhm.
a completely different scientific world now.
Right.
So,
Right.
and that's what you kind of find with a lot of these. So I'm going to just kind
Right.
of jump into it.
Hi, everybody. Before she
So-
gets going.
Hi. Okay. So the Innocence Project was founded in 1992. So some of the information that I have is a little bit before that when people started getting exonerated from forensics. But most of the numbers I'm going to go through are them specific.
All right.
So to give you an idea, there's been 2,425 exonerations since 1989. And those numbers are as of last year.
Right.
So there's nothing so far this year. And those are DNA, crappy attorneys. It's a whole bunch of
Right.
different things that go into it, different forensics. In that amount of people, in the 2,400 people, they've served a total of 21,000 plus years in prison
Jeez. That's crazy.
wrongfully, which I thought just the idea of 21,000 years is a lot. So the Innocence Project reports that there's 2 to 5% of the current prison and jail population is in there wrongfully. So if you take the 2 million people that are incarcerated right now in the US approximately, and you take even just 2% of that, that's 40,000 people in jail right now with wrongful
Jesus.
convictions.
Okay.
So just roping you in with that.
Right. That's a lot.
A lot.
That's yeah.
And we have the science and technology to help a lot of these people, but not all of them.
Right.
Because we'll go into it a little bit more. There's, there's like snitch testimonies, like the jailbird
Right.
informants, like how accurate is that? Like, what are they getting
Right.
in exchange? There's police misconduct, which
Right.
is hard to prove. False confessions, which a lot of times with those younger, I mean, we've seen it before on different documentaries that I think I've read somewhere that like 10% of the wrongful convictions were people that were mentally disabled or had a really low IQ.
Right.
So those are going to clearly be
Right.
forced confessions in a
Right.
way.
That
and then
that documentary that we watched, How to Make a Killer, right? Right? Is that what it's called?
Making a Murderer
That's the
with
one.
Stephen Avery.
Making a
Mhm.
Murder. There's actually evidence of false confessions or false accusations, false
Yeah.
testimony, all that in that one documentary.
Brendan, I think, was his name, and he
Right.
was this nephew.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
was a little bit slower. So, the Innocence Project, for anyone that doesn't know, I mean, it's definitely worth taking a look at the website
Right.
and kind of seeing what they do. They're all over the country and in different locations because they need to understand what the DNA law is for their area, basically. So
Mhm.
let's say New Orleans, they have their own Innocence Project. And then they also help consult with like primary attorneys on cases. So they do a lot of really great work. And I don't think they make a lot of money because it's mostly like out of pocket for them.
Right.
You know, like they take in money, like donations. So for the Innocence Project and what they have documented as of last year, it was 367 people in the United States had been exonerated by DNA evidence. 21 of those people were on death row.
Jeez.
Mhm. And the average was 14 years in prison before they got out.
Wow.
So just out
That's
of 367
insane.
of them.
That's
and like
insane.
I said before, there's 40,000 plus ish people
Right.
wrongly in prison right now.
Right.
So, one of the very first cases, so it goes back to 1989,
Okay.
and that his name is Gary Dodson. Back then there wasn't DNA like there is now.
Right.
But, they were able to do different blood types and things. So he was arrested in 1979 for kidnapping and rape of a girl in Illinois. He served 10 years, and the girl ended up coming back and saying, just kidding, it wasn't him. I had consensual sex. Totally confessed that. Well, the trial judge said that he believed her previous testimony versus the one now.
Right.
So completely ignored it. The governor ended up giving him like not a pardon, but like let him out after 6 years, but like you have to be in good behavior. Okay.
Right.
So he gets out, he gets in trouble. He got in a fight in a bar. Gary goes back to prison and he has to serve out the rest of his time for this rape from 1979. Well, at this time it's like 87, 85. There's a little bit more forensic science now.
Right.
And what they found out is that there was A and B blood type. Gary's blood type was B, and the victim's blood type was B. So we don't know where the A comes from, right? Or it was like vice versa. And so what they tried to do is fight it. And the scientists said, oh, it could have been a mixture of sweat or something else. Well, it ended up eventually getting completely thrown out, and his case got overturned and he got released. There were other evidence in there too, but basically the forensic analyst just kind of went off of like, well, it could be this or it could be that, instead of it being like, no, his blood type is, B and you have A. Right. So, I mean, it's just going back to even like what we think of DNA now is kind of like black and white, right? Like we think of it so specific.
Right.
And it wasn't always the case.
Right. It's definitely changed. And that the advances in DNA, they've gotten it down now to the point where they can isolate regions of history. So it's definitely come a long way since the 80s. Yeah.
I mean, even like the hair analysis that they did, even now, hair analysis is kind of, it's gotten better. But back in 87, 89, they basically did some hair analysis and it didn't even really match. So it ended up being that it was her boyfriend at the time.
Oh.
So the guy served 10 years. And that's the first one like on record that you can find. It was 1989 of where newer science helped get somebody out of jail from previous convictions.
Right.
So going back, I'm going to throw a lot of numbers at y'all right now. So there's the 367 DNA exonerees to date. Okay. 14 years is the average number that they served. It's about 5,100 total years served in jail for innocent people. The average age when they went in was 26 and a half. Average age coming out, 42, almost 43 years old by the time that they were proven innocent.
Right.
21, like I said, 21 of the 367 were on death row, and 41 of the 367 actually pleaded guilty to the crimes they didn't commit.
Right.
So, which goes to the very beginning of like this process, right? And like how it's corrupt and broken in different levels. Maybe corrupt's not the right word. In some cases, maybe it is, but it's broken in a lot of different ways.
Right. But here's the other side of that with the guilty pleas, where they go and they say, okay, I'm guilty. If you feel like you're cornered, you're going to plea bargain out.
Yeah.
So you're going to accept a guilty plea in order to get a lesser sentence or lesser charge. Like it may not be murder 1. They might reduce it down to murder 2. Right. So that, and if you feel, and when you're in that little room and those people are in there saying all the things that they say to you,
right.
You know, when you feel cornered, you're going to be like, okay.
Yeah. I mean,
how do I get out of this?
Movies and TV, right? Like you see it like all the time where it's like somebody says that they're innocent.
Right.
But really when it comes down to it, if you feel like you're going to be found guilty because of whatever, and they just have it out for you.
Right or wrong. That's the thing. Right or wrong. You feel like you have to do what you can to protect however you can.
Yeah.
So that there is some of that too that goes on.
Right. And what's crazy is I was going to save it till later, but there are some states that actually, if you plead guilty up front, it doesn't matter what comes out evidence-wise after. They won't take back your original plea.
Really?
Yeah. There's still states, and that's part of what the Innocence Project is looking into and trying to fix. And I mean, they do a lot of stuff behind the scenes as well with like laws. And let's see. So the numbers that I'm going to talk about really quick are kind of like what out of the 367, why they were overturned or what the problems were. And you have to remember that it's not usually just DNA, right? There is usually a false confession or other things that are involved with the conviction at that point.
Right.
The DNA comes out after the fact. So if there was the no DNA up front, they're being, found guilty based on eyewitness testimony and stuff. So it says 69% were involved with eyewitness misidentification, whether it's lineup, mugshots, in court, pointing the person out.
Right.
It's 69%
misidentification. Okay. On that note, there's a funny story that happened to us in when we were in our trip to DC. Okay, tell me the funny story. I'm going to set the stage for you. All right. So this is the day we're going to go into the White House and go see the White House. Do you remember this yet?
No.
Still not. Okay. So we're walking down a sidewalk and there's a really cool building on our left that we saw that was awesome. And we get going down the sidewalk a little further and there's an entry to the gate that goes to the White House.
Okay.
We were almost hit by a van.
Oh, we were.
There was a van that missed us by 18 inches.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Not a lot. I mean, it was
not much.
The closest I've ever been to being hit by a car.
It was close. And it shook us both. And let me tell you what happened afterwards. So this only goes into the misidentification of people. Now, we are talking about a very large cargo van. I'm talking about one of those ones that you would see delivering like Amazon packages.
Yeah. That's exactly what I thought of.
Big. I said the van was black. She said the van was white. And to this day, no agreement.
So weird. Like we completely remembered it.
Almost got hit by the same van and remembered two opposite colors.
We were walking and talking about it like seconds after it happened.
Literally seconds after it happened.
Holy crap, we almost got ran over by Secret Service or whatever.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
And then I got in trouble for saying.
Well, no, you got in trouble because you kept saying,
oh man,
like every light post and every tree and every leaf is like a listening device.
They were.
Which I'm not totally gonna.
So the only reason I brought it up was it goes to show you that in that moment of any moment, and there's actually been a few TV series that have proven that eyewitness testimony is not reliable at all. It just goes to show you the two of us, and not even that stressful of a situation, but a very uncomfortable situation and like instantly scary.
Yeah.
Right. But your memory is not reliable.
We couldn't have been
in that moment.
Besides the size of the vehicle and almost getting hit by it, everything else we were completely opposite in our recollection of it.
Right.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's strange how it happens.
And there are videos out there and like different studies done on like what people remember and how long after. And we just watched something on that too, where it's like, you know, the longer it goes, the worse the memory is.
Right.
But yeah, after reading this stuff and going through additional things that I didn't even print out, there should be nothing allowed in court that has to do with identifications. Right. Maybe it helps you narrow down a suspect,
sure,
but it shouldn't, which I guess that's part of what the problem is with the DNA stuff is before the DNA as it is now, it's what started police, right? It narrowed their search and narrowed their mind. And then it becomes this game of like trying to prove that person guilty versus trying to find the right person. And I'm going to get into some numbers on those too, on like how many, there's like tens of thousands of people that are then found. Yeah. Anyways, I don't remember, so I have to wait till my notes.
Right. Question real quick that was brought up that Gina asked. And this may be something you get into later. I'm not sure, but she was asking that what makes them decide to go back and review the evidence? Is there something in the case that comes up?
So what it sounded like with the Innocence Project specifically was it may be brought to them as, you know, here's the case. They start to look into it. If it's strong enough where you can really go in and there's, you know, the possibility of DNA or turning it over, they seem to have a pretty, like a small group that can do it. So they have to be a little bit pickier, which I think that's why there's only 367.
Right.
And I think not only, I shouldn't say it like that, but I think they're responsible for like 190 of those, the Innocence Project specifically. So, so Gina just said her ex-boyfriend and her were pulled over when Richard Ramirez was on the loose, which was the original Night Stalker, I believe. And thought my boyfriend was him. It took 5 hours to release him. Okay, see, that's scary.
To realize it wasn't him.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, that's crazy.
Well, especially
but those are the cases
that like the 70s. So
that's the thing with any of this stuff. You know, you get a general description. You know how many mugshot like descriptions, those drawings, whatever they call it, they call
the sketch, like
the sketch artist things. I have fit so many of those. Like if I see one that looks similar to me, I'm not going in public for a couple of days until I figure out. Like I'm just not.
So if you shave your beard randomly, then I'm going to know that something's up.
There's probably a dude on the news with a beard, and I'm not doing it. No, because it's true that happens.
Well, and that's another thing too, is that when you take that fresh memory and you put it into a sketch, and then you take the lineup and you know, and I mean, I'll skip ahead to that really quick because so what happens with these lineups, hold on, now I'm all thrown for a loop.
Sorry.
So eyewitness identification reform is happening in the country right now. Innocence Project's really working on that. Mistaken eyewitnesses identified, they contributed to approximately 71% of the 360 wrongful convictions that were overturned post-conviction by DNA. Okay. So of the ones that they worked on. And
what was that number?
71% of 360 of the ones that the Innocence Project worked on.
Right.
So it goes back to like what we're saying is those lineups, the mugshots, the sketches, all of those things really kind of play a part. So if you have, there's different types of lineups. Okay. So first one is kind of like what you've seen in the movies. I mean, I say the movies because I've never done it, but I mean, I guess people have done it in real life. So the standard lineup is like, there's an administrator. You've done it.
No,
which side of the glass?
I have never been a part of a lineup.
So there's, you know, you go in, you look at the 5 people or whatever it is, and the administrator can send like cues without meaning to, can like kind of like, you know, is it 2? And voice goes up. And so the person like knows to pick whoever it is. So that's a flaw in the system.
Right.
Then there's a standard lineup without instruction. And so the person, the victim, let's say, or a witness or whoever it is, assumes that one of the people in the room, one of them is guilty, right? One of them is the suspect. Right. But that's not always the case. So sometimes they'll point out an innocent person just because they feel that they're supposed to pick somebody.
Right. Well, you've heard the line in Law and Order. That's where I remember it from. What? And they always, when they walk people in there, they always say, and I don't know if they do this in real versions because, again, I've never been a part of one, but the police officer will say the suspect may or may not be in this group.
Right. Which is part of the reform and what they've worked on, making that a standard procedure. So it wasn't always the case though. So you take these cases from, the 90s and early 2000s, that wasn't even the middle 2000s. It wasn't a thing. The other thing is that sometimes the police wouldn't put down like the confidence level. So let's say I go in, I say it's number 2 guy, right? And I'm like, okay, confident. Like I'm not positive, but like he looks familiar. If you don't put down not sure or, 10% or whatever it is, then it just is automatically assumed it's like, that's him. That's the guy 100%.
Right.
So now it's required that they put down a confidence level.
Like a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's so weird.
Yeah.
Because even that doesn't make any sense. Like, because I'm telling you right now, that van was black. 100%.
Yeah. And I felt 100% the opposite.
Right.
So.
And I have 100% confidence in that.
Right. But I guess if you have 2 different witnesses go in and one person's like 100% confident it's number 2 and somebody else goes in and is 100% confidence number 4, what do they do with that? Right. Do they then just look at the number 2 100% because that's their suspect that looks like the mugshot? Right. But there's still not enough evidence.
Right. I don't know how you do that the right. Wow.
A lot of these DNA cases that have been overturned started out that way though.
Right.
They started out with these hunches and then they build the case around the person. And you hear that all the time, right?
Right.
And it clearly happens more than it should.
Yes, it does.
So yeah, it's saying basically that it's really critical to catch the confidence of the eyewitness. They deal with things like the double blind, like they'll kind of flip it out, like switch it up a little bit, where they will do the mug shots. They'll also do the lineups. They don't have like the cops or anyone that has anything to do with the case in the room. They have a third party person go in with the person. What did you see?
I was reading the comments. It was,
So let me.
You got to go back to the numbers.
So mixed up now.
I know. I'm sorry.
I'm like a planner, and now I've like skipped
totally
my plan.
Go back to one more.
I don't think so.
Yep.
Okay, hold on.
There you go.
I do have a lot of papers.
There's like 17 of them. Nope. Keep going.
Oh shoot, that's not it either.
Yeah, that's the one. There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the misidentification from 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So 44% of 367 exonerated cases, 44% involved misapplication of forensic science.
Okay.
So I think that's not too surprising just because I think science has changed so much. But scientists and analysts used to be so confident.
Right.
So confident.
Yeah, that's true. It was
their interpretation of it.
And back then there was a lot more interpretation that they can apply.
Yeah.
Versus today where it's like the 99% match, where back then it's like, oh, you have a certain blood type and it's red.
Right.
Like
it doesn't match. Oh, it's because it mixed with sweat. And it was like, there was like chemicals, cleaning chemicals. And it was just, it's crap. Right.
Right.
We know that now. But if you have a title at the end of your name, people automatically want to believe you because you're PhD or I don't know, science.
Well, and that's why science, right? Which is why science itself is entertaining for me, at least, because you can get 2 doctors to study the same topic and you get completely different answers, or perspectives. So it's no different with this,
right? 28% had false confessions in these 367, and 17% involved informants. So that's another thing is that if you have an informant that points the finger at Bob, no offense to Bob.
It's always Bob. Poor guys.
You can't have that as like your only evidence. It has to be deeper than that. It has to be like it just blows my mind that it's going to be like an informant says something, whether it's a jailhouse snitch or whatever it is. Like there's a motive behind that, right? Especially with informants. Like who just informs just to inform? Unless you're a witness.
Yeah, they're trying to get something out of it. There's usually
a lot of times.
Yeah, there's usually something in return.
So, but if you don't have any other evidence, which kind of makes me question the jury, but we'll go in. That's not even good. I'm not going to even touch into that right now.
Right. I mean, we already know how juries can sway a completely rock solid case in O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, I mean, it's
guilty as all get out, and there's no way the evidence didn't point in that direction. But clearly, the jury had
there was a
ulterior
beyond
motive.
the doubt, like beyond a reasonable doubt. But
it is beyond.
I don't know.
Yeah, 100%.
So, this is. I read this to you. I have to read this one because it's a little bit longer. So 162. All right, this is so crazy to me. Out of the 367 exonerees, 162 of them had assailants that were identified. Okay. While the wrong people were in jail, the perpetrators that actually were guilty convicted 152 violent crimes, 82 sexual assaults, 35 murders, and 35 other violent crimes, while the innocent ones were in jail.
Wow.
So that's a whole nother side to this. Like not only is, the innocent guy getting the shit end of the stick because he's in jail.
Right.
But there's a bad guy out there doing more stuff. Right. So like it's like the ripple effect.
Right.
It's crazy.
Right.
Like those numbers are a lot. 367 exonerees, 162 of them assailants identified. Out of the 162, 152 violent crimes were committed.
That's crazy.
And 82 sexual assaults.
Right.
It's crazy because they were still out on the street.
Right. And then once they're caught, now they've doubled the number of criminals, even though the original group had nothing to do with it.
Well, and that goes into where different state laws and where there's reform needed because some of them, the evidence, like they have like expiration dates basically on the evidence that you can bring to trial. So even if you wanted, a new trial.
Right. Well, even some of them, clearly some of these don't apply with the statute of limitations, but the statute of limitations comes into play with a lot of it too. Yeah. Because if those guys have been serving the entire time and somebody else comes in and 10 years and the statute of limitations 9.
Yep. Do you remember that story that we did in the first podcast about the Las Vegas girl that was raped and murdered in that abandoned house? And the case it was the DNA, the sexual assault kit was sitting in the police station for like 20 years. It just was never tested. There wasn't money or whatever. And it ended up eventually being tested. And it was like a cop.
Yeah, it was one of the cops.
It was like a cop that had just got fired or something. Right. And it was like a month after he got fired that it happened. And he ended up going to jail, but it was like 20 years after the crime.
Right.
So, and that was kit just sitting.
Right. In certain states, rape is life. Like there is no statute of limitations. Like murder.
But not that changed a lot after the 70s and 80s too.
I mean, and that's the other problem too, is there's no consistency in the criminal system, state to state. And a lot of jurisdictions don't communicate. I mean, there's a lot of problems with the criminal system, but.
Which that was like, Ted Bundy got away with a lot of things because they didn't crosstalk. So between states and departments.
Right.
Sadly, this next part didn't really surprise me. So it's the demographics of the 367. So out of the 367 DNA exonerees, 225 of them were African American. That's 61%. Okay. The craziest part of that is that 42% were cross-racial misidentified. So that means that 42% of the Black guys that were in there were actually white guys that did the crime.
Wow.
Or Latinos or whatever.
Right.
But it was 42% cross-racial misidentification in the 61% of the exonerees.
Right. Which
is really high.
Speaks to an underlying issue. But yeah, I mean, it's sad. Yeah. It really is.
Yeah, that number kind of blew me away. The next demographic in it is 30% were Caucasian, 8% Latino, and then it goes into Asian and Native American, and then other self-identified.
That's how I identify.
You're self-identified other.
I'm American. I do.
Just American.
I put other and then American. Yeah, that's my race.
Yeah, that was a number that kind of, sadly, it wasn't crazy, but the numbers were high.
Right. So Gina was asking if the numbers, are those state specific or like national numbers?
No, this is from the Innocence Project, like .org. So it's basically the 367 that they've done like nationally in the US.
Right.
So they do have Innocence Projects in specific states though.
Right.
Like this was one of the, like this was just an example of one of the cases in 1980. A man named Malcolm was arrested for rape. And he faced life without parole. He had like a paid defense, right? Like just
city attorney.
Yeah. City attorney. They neglected to do an opening statement or cross-examine witnesses.
Right. So
just didn't even do it.
The criminal I can't even say. I see when I was a bad kid, they used to be called criminal pretenders, but they're called criminal defenders or city defenders. Excuse me. Anyway, they get paid by the case, not by the hour.
Yeah, and clearly they didn't do anything. He was 21 years old, the father of 2 when he was convicted.
Right.
Okay. So keep in mind, obviously he didn't do it. 38 years later, he was found innocent from DNA testing.
Right.
And that's just one story. He missed his kid's entire life. And when he got out, he had a grown son and grandkid by the time he got out.
Wow.
So I'm going to go back to this page. Don't let me forget. I'm going to give it to you so I can read the bottom part
That's probably
later.
A terrible idea.
Well, now I'm all mixed up anyways.
Wow,
so
that didn't take long.
Let me put that over there.
And just to give you guys an understanding of this right here, this is normal. Okay. Like this is why we have so many notepads all over the house. There's literally one in every room so that the memory could be refreshed on a regular basis.
I just read this.
Right. You've been through it more than once, I'm sure. And the thing is, it's really funny about it is this is something you've looked into for years. This isn't like, oh, one day I decided to pick a topic. No, this is something you've looked at for a long time.
But there's just so much information.
I know.
And my problem is that I want to know it all.
Right. No, I know.
I've narrowed it down to 11 pages.
That's good.
But I've already gone through like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to scare
We went through 7 reams of paper to get to her 11 though.
We did. And ink. Let me see. Nope. I already did that too. Now I'm all mixed up. Oh, this was interesting. Okay. This is crazy. So the FBI, this is not the Innocence Project. This is a completely different number. It says that in 2015, okay, not that long ago, 5 years ago, the FBI announced that its hair experts overstated the probability of a match between hair evidence and the defendant hair in 95% of the 268 cases it reviewed.
Wow.
So going back only 5 years ago,
FBI.
Yeah, 5 years ago, they were so confident in things that now what they know now is that 95% of the 268 cases they reviewed overstated the probability.
Really?
Yeah. That's crazy.
That's crazy.
I know. So it's kind of like, it makes me think like, how much should we be relying on science? Like, it's so hard. Like, what do you use to convict somebody?
Right.
You know, life in prison or death row. Like,
I don't know what details you're getting into as far as evidence is concerned down the road, but I do believe, now this doesn't apply to all of them, but in like firearm fatalities or discharges or whatever, they actually now can they could trace the bullet itself to the gun, right? So there's certain scratch marks that every gun it's like a fingerprint.
The turn.
Right.
But
if it's my understanding that the bullet itself is actually made of different compositions from the manufacturer.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
I crossed it out, but I'm going to read it since you brought it up. Good thing I have 11 pages of notes. I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're talking about, but it's lead analysis. So comparative bullet lead analysis. It was believed to be able to link bullets found at crime scenes to bullets possessed by a suspect based on the lead composition of the bullet. Since the 1980s, the FBI conducted bullet lead examinations in over 2,500 cases. They stopped using this in 2002 because they found problems with interpretations of the results of the analysis.
Oh,
I know.
Okay, well, that's something we're going to have to look into a little bit more, because I thought at one point that because
thanks, Bridget.
I thought at one point that the gun manufacturer or the bullet manufacturers were required to have specific compositions.
They may now. I don't know. But as of 2002, they had to stop using that.
Dang it, I don't know if that's real or not. I might have made that up in my head, but I'm pretty sure I remember hearing that.
Possibly. I don't know what goes on in your head.
Nobody does, to be really honest.
I think it's funny that you brought that up, because I looked at that and I was like, oh, that's kind of a cool thing. And it's totally like a gun thing. So I thought you'd be interested in it. But because you see that all the time. Like, and it's not talking about this, the turns.
Not the, no.
What is that? Striations?
The striations, not the striations.
It's not that.
No, it's the composition of the lead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought there was something.
But I think it's more important to know that it came from a gun that was in, because like, let's say, I mean, if you think of it like that, we could have the same ammo as Bob and Bob is, the one that shot. But if we have the same ammo, does that mean,
well, no, but it can,
but he has the gun with the striations or the bullet
here's the chance, right? But the chances of two people being identified in the same crime with the same bullet bought from the same location and the same manufacturer, the odds are astronomical. It would be extremely hard for that to happen.
Well, Bob's a really popular guy. He might know a lot of people.
I mean, you think about let's say you go down to your local sporting goods store. Yeah. Any one of those, they have 17 different kinds of 9mm.
Right.
So then you got to get the right brand, and then those brands belong to certain plants.
But are you saying like what's a brand like Winchester? Like, are you saying that those have a very specific formula, like lead composition?
Yes.
And so, but Winchester's a really popular brand of bullet.
Right. No, I understand that, but it would be one piece to the puzzle. It's not like, oh, hey, you have the same bullet, you're guilty.
But I guess that's where it comes up to. It's like that circumstantial, like how much of the circumstantial ends up adding up to people serving life in prison. But now you have like somebody did a sketch and then they picked like the wrong person in a lineup. And then
what's up,
now
Chris?
You have lead from a bullet. And I mean, it's like, and then when you have 95%, I have water right there.
Oh, I'm good. I'm dying over here.
Oh, you have water.
I'm trying.
Oh no. I hope you don't have the CV. Better not. Okay. Well, since we talked about bullets, I'm going to go to my other crossed off thing, because I thought this was kind of interesting too, even though it's not really DNA, but arson. So in 1992, arson, I think I don't know how they can tell. It's like a magical skill on how they can tell whether a fire was accidental or arson.
Well, so there are key things you look at in those situations. The more intense the heat, the closer to the source you are. Right. So let's say you have an oil lamp. I'm going back old school. You have an oil lamp. It falls over in the barn, right?
Yeah.
Where that oil lamp fell is going to be the hottest part of that fire.
Right.
Okay. Now, how they would tell if it was thrown or if it fell is typically the same. Like if you think, like if I were to throw a plate of spaghetti, right, it's going to smear.
Right.
Versus if I drop this plate of spaghetti, it's going to just like that. Right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the same idea. If you see it thrown, the accelerant is going to actually hit whatever the material is and continue to run or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But if it just breaks, it's just going to splash on the ground.
Even that's
not always
science, right? Like that's a form of a science. And
arson investigators go through hours and hours of hours of training, if not years.
Even that science has changed because it said that there used to be things called alligatoring of wood, crazed glass, and sagged furniture springs could actually occur in accidental fires, but then they completely changed all the guidelines in the 2000s. The NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, completely changed their guidelines on whether it was arson or not. So there's people that were convicted of arson that actually didn't commit arson. So it's just crazy. Like, I feel like 2000 wasn't that long ago. It really feels like it was 5 years ago. Yeah, I know it was 20, but like, it feels like 2000, we had a lot more scientific skills. But clearly we were like just in the baby phase of that.
Right.
So the different laws, I mean, there's a lot of reform happening. There's a lot of different laws that need to change, especially but the laws aren't keeping up with the amount of change in science. And so far, there's only 5 states that have enacted laws to clarify the wrongly convicted. 5 out of how many? 50. 50 states. There's only 5 that have enacted laws. And there's all kinds of different ones. It's California, Connecticut, Michigan, Nevada, Texas, and Wyoming. And it's basically they're allowing convicted people to seek relief based on flawed evidence or, bad defense attorneys, things like that. But there haven't been a lot of rights for people that have been convicted. And I think, it's really easy for society to dismiss people once they're found guilty of something. And then there's not a lot of rights, right? Because the people that are guilty don't deserve the rights. But when you have 2 to 5% of 2 million people that could possibly be convicted wrong, then there needs to be something like the Innocence Project that's fighting for those people. And it doesn't sound like there's enough to do all of the caseloads. And I'm sure there's some guilty people out there that are trying to say they're innocent and they're not. And they're just wasting the time of the other people.
Right. Well, that's everybody who gets arrested says, I didn't do it.
Right. If there's a chance to get out. Right.
Right.
Which is why I think they have to be picky.
Thing that people say.
Right. Is that what you said when you when you were in the lineup?
I would never lie to a police officer.
So based on the laws, I mean, you have to go to the different states to find out specifically what the laws are. But this says, despite the fact that approximately 11% of the nation's more than 360 wrongful DNA convictions pled guilty, there's certain laws that do not permit access to DNA when the defendant originally pled guilty. So Bob goes to jail, pleads guilty.
Oh, Bob, buddy, you got to
Bob goes to jail. He pleads guilty of a crime. Because he pled guilty, he does not have access to DNA after he's already been charged and convicted. Certain laws do not permit access to DNA when the defendant originally pled guilty.
So if I go in there and let's say in one of my drunken stupors, I'm like, yeah, I did it. That's it. I'm done.
So let's say it was 1995. Nope, that was too young for you. Let's say it was 2000. Cool. Let's say it was 2000, and you go and you plead guilty, and they don't check the DNA, right? Because maybe the evidence the science wasn't there. So you plead guilty, you go to jail, yada yada yada. Now you're appealing it. You don't have a right to that DNA to be tested because you pled guilty to it.
Wow.
There's laws. Yeah, prohibiting that.
Wow,
there's also laws that fail to.
What state is that?
It doesn't say. It just says.
It's probably a generalized thing, I would imagine.
Yeah, there's only 5 states that have really. I mean, there's more states that have done other reform, but there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Is the right reform?
The other problem is preservation of DNA evidence. So let's say you again arrested. You plead guilty, you go to jail.
Okay, me and Bob are not the only 2 men in America that commit crimes. Okay, there's other people right now. Oh yeah.
But the same scenario: you go to jail, 2000. You plead guilty, and that's it. That DNA evidence doesn't have to be preserved. There's not specific guidelines or safeguards in place to preserve it, so that now I'm your attorney that's trying to appeal it because you're innocent. I don't have access to that DNA because it wasn't preserved right.
Right.
So
wow.
That's another thing, is preserving the evidence after conviction.
Right. Which there's now, I think it's a little bit better than it used to be. Back then, they used to throw it in
today.
No, I'm saying,
I don't know.
In general, the preservation of evidence is not as
right.
It's not as bad.
But there's a lot of police misconduct as well.
Yeah, there is that. Yep.
As much as we are like super big supporters of law enforcement, so that's not at all what I'm saying. But there are some bad ones out there.
Right. Well, and
have you watched The Wire?
You can leave the police officers out of it.
Mm-hmm.
The prosecutors, they look to create their own name for themselves, and the more convictions they get, the better off they are. Right? The more they're desired and sought out.
Ego.
Right. Oh yeah. So if they get 100% conviction rate, you don't think that's going to change their life? You damn right it will.
Right.
So the prosecution, and God only knows what the judges are getting. You know, a little elbow, hey buddy, little buy you a bottle of 60-year-old scotch. Who knows?
Why does it have to be 60-year-old scotch? Like, what's the difference between 6-year-old scotch and 60-year-old scotch?
A lot.
Like, doesn't it just start to taste like it's getting old?
It's 54 years. It's a big difference.
Thank you. The math half of me is you.
Anyway, it's yes. But it is better. Yes, 60-year-old scotch is better than 6-year-old scotch. Just saying.
Yeah, I was going to read that.
And if I was going to give it to a judge, there's certain kinds you got to get. You know what I mean?
You can't bribe people. It's illegal.
But you tell me that doesn't happen?
I'm sure.
I'll tell you right now, if I can increase my pay by 10%, I would damn sure give my boss a bottle of whatever. Is he watching?
He might be.
Oh, shit. Well, if you are, name it, buddy. I got a bottle waiting for you.
Yeah. Once we go to the store again, which might be
I would go to the store, like just for that. I would.
I just ship it. That's why we're doing everything.
And you're telling me that I guarantee they're doing that in the judicial system.
I don't know if I've ever bribed a boss by getting something.
You don't bribe them by giving them anything. You give them a gift with that little incentive, not
expecting.
Yeah,
anything.
Right. Exactly. It's
just
that little wink,
so
wink.
Kind.
Right. It's the wink, wink, kick, kick, nudge, nudge. Right.
Okay. I'm almost done. I flew through those pages. Here's the problem. I feel like I'm bursting at the seams right now because there's so much information and I want to talk about everything.
Yeah, it's a problem.
I feel like I'm talking 400 miles per hour.
No, you're doing good.
I mean, I do that all the time anyways, though.
You do. You're actually talking slower to them than you do to me, ever.
I'm talking nicer to them, too. I'm just kidding. That's what went through my head just now. All right, so...
Not wrong.
I'm going to change it up a little bit.
About to hit me.
I'm going to change it up a little bit. A whole different side of the DNA. So, I mean, we talked about the wrongful convictions, but I want to talk about a controversial, I didn't say that word.
Controversial.
Right? DNA process that actually captured a huge serial rapist and killer called the Golden State Killer in California.
Yeah.
So also known as the East Area Rapist or the Visalia Ransacker. And if you guys followed this, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. It's an insane story. Mm-hmm. I have books on it if you need recommendations on it.
Right.
I've listened to podcasts. I've listened to everything. So because it fascinates me that it's just so horrific. So Joseph James DeAngelo, who's now known as the Golden State Killer. He was 72 years old when he got caught in 2018. So he's 74 maybe right now. He went years. 1974 was his first crime that they can link him to. So from 1974 to 1986, he raped 51 people, murdered 12, and burgled hundreds of homes.
Burglarized.
Burgled.
Burgled?
Yeah. That's a word. Burgled.
No.
It reminds me of the burglar.
Burglar. He burgled them.
He did. I hate you sometimes. I do think it's a word. It is. Google. Define burgled.
Hey, Google. Is
So-
burgle the word?
Google's mad at you too right now. It's a word.
Oh, it sure is.
Thank you.
Burgled.
I always feel like I'm like a smart person that just always sounds stupid, but
Past
I'm like
tense.
really a smart person.
Burgled.
I told you. All
Past-
right. I even wrote this myself. Oh, I'm crying now. You drive me
Our
crazy.
house in London has been burgled. That's not real. If anyone out there says the word burgled,
Yes, it's
no,
a word.
No, that's not a word. It is some
And I think
made
it's
up.
funny you're like questioning me.
No, that's
when
not
I-
real. There's no way that's real.
It's Google and on your Android, so
Burgled. I got burgled. Get the hell out of here.
it is a funny word.
It's terrible.
Okay, I'm talking about
I'm
a serious
sorry.
topic right
Okay.
now. Gosh,
Okay, my
you're
bad.
like a little kid.
Burgled.
All right, so how am I supposed to say this next part now that you're like burgling over there? Okay, so
Burglite. Okay, never mind.
side note, why are all bad serial killers have 3 names? Do they do that on purpose? Stop. Collect yourself.
I've lost my damn mind.
Um,
Okay.
So Joseph
right.
James D'Angelo, 3 names.
Yeah. Joseph James
What else?
D'Angelo.
There's other ones that are
Well,
they're always 3 names. Okay, anyways. But I'm thinking of all the ones that I'm thinking of right now, and they're all 2 names. So I'm
All
gonna
the
move
ones
on.
I ever know are like single names. That's when you know you're like you've made it. Bundy, Dahmer.
Okay, but they have other names.
Now they don't.
But I
That's
guess those
it.
both have just 2 names. Okay, forget that I said that. This is where I wish we could edit it. Okay.
It's definitely less entertaining.
So if you guys don't know, and I mean, I'll kind of read my notes, but I kind of know this story. Over the years, so when he stopped murdering and breaking in and doing all the horrible things he was doing, 1986 is the last case that they had him linked to. So it went cold, but they didn't really give up on it. And there's a guy named Paul Holes who really cracked the case. And Paul is a cold case kind of like investigator, detective, but
Mhm.
he's a forensics guy.
Right.
And he was up in like the Sacramento County kind of area up there. And so he kept working on this and they were narrowing it down. And he actually retired just before they caught
Oh,
the Golden
really?
State Killer. But he still had a huge part in it because
Right.
what happened was they had DNA evidence from one of the rapes and murders. It was like 1978, and they still had the DNA in the cold case file. And what they did is they took and submitted the DNA to like a 23andMe or Ancestry, one of the DNA kind of things. And when they got the results back, it had a bunch of people that were like distant relatives, right?
Right.
So they ended up doing like forensic genealogy to be able to narrow it down. And they had about 6 suspects. And as they were narrowing down those 6 suspects, Joseph James D'Angelo kind of became a bigger. What?
Nothing. I'm burgled.
He became a bigger like focal point.
Yeah.
And over the years there were like 8,000. So the fact that they had kind of narrowed it down using this reverse DNA,
Yeah, no.
was a huge step in the case. And it is questionable on if, we should be using this type of technology this way. But I mean, I'm good with it because it got
Right.
him off the street.
Well,
and I don't go around murdering and raping people, so I don't have anything to hide. I mean,
Right.
I
Well,
obviously don't.
the problem was it violated privacy issues of the original donors.
But the thing is he was the donor. Here's the thing.
No, not his.
You mean
blood.
his family?
Right.
Right.
And not his, because that guy deserves everything he got.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is there are certain things that are implied when you do this, and they're in their terms and
Right.
policies agreement. Part of that is privacy. You only put out whatever information you choose. So you can lock down certain portions of your profile on these pages when you do it. We've done both.
Yeah, we both have.
So there are certain privacy rules that were being violated in order to gather the
Yeah, I
information.
think they had to use a bogus name when they submitted the DNA sample to get
There-
Yeah,
but right.
here, so to narrow it down even more, so they had to wait until the trash, which you hear all the time in like movies and things, but they did. They were waiting for his trash. They collected his trash, and ran the DNA test and it was a match, like conclusively a match.
Mhm.
They wanted to double check and make sure. So they ran it again and it was a match. Yeah. And that's basically how they caught the Golden State Killer after 1974? How many years is that math guy? 20, 36, 40, 40.
What?
4.
43. I
3 years older than me. No. 74 is 5 years older than me. 45. Almost 46 years. We can't do math segments on this.
And today's show is brought to you by the number 4.
So
I got to work on my Elmo voice, but we got this down.
Oh God. I need a calculator with me all the time. So yeah, I mean, all these years later, he's finally caught using this technology. And so like, I'm good with that. Like, I don't care if I got contacted by a detective and they said, oh, hey, your 4th cousin is, a suspect. I'd be like, cool. What do you need from me?
Yeah. I think it was closer in relation to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, the thing is there's 2 sides of the story, right? There's the people who want their privacy protected.
Right.
And then there's the people that are like, if it solves a murder, take whatever you need.
Well, and I guess you don't have to help, right? So like, let's say the detective comes
there's an option for that
and says like, hey, your DNA was linked to somebody who has, let me see that paper. I forgot.
You're welcome. This is why I remember things.
I did forget.
I know.
So I know I just said that. So, yeah, I mean, I guess you could say like, I don't want anything to do with it. And that's fine. Yeah. But if a detective came to somebody and said, these are the crimes this person is suspected of committing, and it was that guy's crimes, and you didn't want to help, well, then you're a shitty citizen. Like, how would you not want to put that person behind bars? Like, I'd want.
I don't. I only agree on the fact that the guilty should be punished for their crimes. I don't agree.
I know the individual rights. I know.
Well, not only that, but you don't know who that guy is or who he's tied to. I'll tell you right now, if a Don and his cousin got whacked and my blood would help solve that case, I'd tell him to pound sand. Nope, I'm not helping you.
I wonder if you'd have to though. Like, what if? Yeah, I guess you'd have to get permission, huh?
I'm not going to help. I'm not going to help convict somebody who I know is capable of eliminating my family.
Yeah,
not happening. I'd be more willing to testify against a corrupt police officer than I would be a gang member or a mafia mob guy.
But that's the thing is, these people don't have to.
I'm not saying
to like get up in court or anything.
I'm not saying
they just
that.
Have to
I know,
show.
but
forensic genealogy fascinates me because it's hard to do just regular genealogy, like just figuring out what the next level is. I'm having trouble finding past my grandfather, so I don't know how they're doing multiple levels from different trees.
Right, our trees are completely opposite. We have ours back to like the early 1700s on 2 different branches.
Yeah,
which is nuts.
Stops. Yeah, can we talk about the lies that I've been told my entire life
about your DNA?
About my DNA.
Yeah,
I was always told that I was French Canadian. A little Scottish. I used to go to the Scottish Festival in Southern California.
DNA is such a
have like no French.
Such a nuisance.
None. I am Irish in English with Scottish.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Well, that's why DNA, this new science stuff, is 100% fascinating.
I mean, if that's right. Next 5 years from now, it might be different.
Well, they've got it.
Science.
Yeah. In today's world, we have DNA marked in a region of a country, like down to the county, like the original origin of that bloodline.
Mine said Dublin.
Insane. Yeah, I know. It's insane.
Like, how do you know that?
I don't know how they're doing it, but whatever they're doing it, I mean, and that's, we're assuming just like they did in the 80s that this is accurate.
Right. We could be looking at this in 15, 20 years and it's
and it's wrong
in the infancy stage.
Right.
Yeah.
And they have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah. But I mean, it's fun now.
Well, it is, unless you're on the wrong end of it.
Yeah. So this is what my extra note was, which was kind of a side topic. And I just wanted to get your opinion on it.
Okay.
So when people are wrongly imprisoned and then there's clear-cut wrongdoing that was done in their case, whether it was police that forced an agenda, whether it was a forensic analyst that lied, whatever the case is. Okay. Do you think that they should be reimbursed for their time that they spent in prison?
Oh,
because there's not anything that's a set standard anywhere, not even like per state. Like it's like a per case, kind of per like individual situation. So there was a man he's a Massachusetts man who was arrested in 1987 for a nightclub shooting. He was convicted of killing a female bystander. Innocent. He spent 27 years in jail. Okay. He gets out, sues. The city suit was thrown out, but he sued the individual cops because of their roles in it. And he was awarded $27 million, $1 million for each year that he was in jail. There's other cases where they maybe got $450,000 for 20 years. It's all over the board. There's not really any rhyme or reason.
I was going to say, if we're getting $1 million a year, can you arrest me? Like I'm guilty of whatever.
I'll see you in 25 years.
Just call me back. That's crazy. No. Okay. To answer your question, we got another question on here about when I turning people in. Would you turn in your own kid?
Yes. I mean, I say that, but
yeah, I don't know. I mean, we say a lot of things when we're not in the pressure of the moment. I don't know.
I think it depends on what it is. I mean, if it's murder, rape, something like that, where they actually
if it's
like absolutely.
If it's a serious crime, I probably yes, I probably would. Because I'd be extremely hesitant though.
But here's the thing: if they're doing something like that, I mean, I guess I know there's accidents as well, but like, what if your kid's a sociopath? Like, what if your kid is a danger to the public? Which thankfully, I don't think any of ours are.
Well, who knows? I mean,
they're still young.
Yeah, and
I mean, they're teenagers. I would think that
sociopaths are good at manipulating situations. So, yeah, who knows?
Okay. Maybe we have one then.
Right. Or two, or three. Who knows? I don't know. I have a hard time with that because it really does depend on the crime and the circumstances surrounding the crime.
I mean, if
it's straight up murder, like cold blood with intent and a plan, yes, I'm going to turn them in. I'd probably shoot them, to be honest. I'd probably just get it over with.
What?
Yeah. I mean, you're a danger to society. If you're planning and plotting. But then you
can't visit them in jail.
Why? I wouldn't.
I know. I wouldn't. I don't know if
if you have that in you, I wouldn't be. I wouldn't.
I mean, I guess what if it was like money laundering?
No, I wouldn't turn them in.
What if it was drug trafficking?
If there's drug trafficking, what's the drug?
Well, obviously, heroin.
Yeah, I'd turn them in.
Yeah. That's why I said that one.
Yeah.
Marijuana.
No,
I know.
Absolutely not. Hell, I'll help you move it. Call me. I can get that shit anywhere.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I believe in right and wrong.
Right.
I really
agree.
do.
I do too. And I look, laws are laws for a reason, and I don't condone anyone breaking them. However,
there's mistakes, and I think that
there are things that I would do to cover for my kids in certain circumstances. You're damn right. But is there certain circumstances I'd throw you under the bus? You're damn right.
But see, here's the other side of it, and this is because we're watching Person of Interest.
Oh, it's a great show, by the way.
Side Netflix.
Note, Person of Interest is fantastic.
Jay wants to go in the military, right?
Yeah.
What if he goes in, he becomes like a super badass, and he comes out and he is this vigilante like him? I wouldn't turn him in. I'd be like,
depends on the circumstances. I think there's too many. That's
it's a TV show, so it's a little different.
Right. Depends on the circumstances.
So,
but to go back to your other question that you asked about people being paid for being in there. Yes, I agree that they should be paid in some manner. However, $1 million a year? No.
They lost like 27 years. Like,
I don't give a damn.
Your entire kids' lives.
No, because you know who's paying for that? Not the prosecutor, not the judge, not the jury.
No. That was the police got sued directly.
Yeah, but
the city didn't.
27. Those police officers don't have that kind of money.
Right.
But I do think that if our system fails somebody, our system should repay them in some form or manner.
Yeah.
Whether it's the median income of the American or an average income or like a normal income on an annual basis of like 60,000 a year. Yes, I agree.
So one of the things I was reading is so first, this guy that got 27 million, he was like, look, the money is what it is, but the fact that nobody apologized, like once he got the verdict that he won the money,
right.
It was finally like, okay, cool. Somebody's admitting that I was done wrong. And that's really what he wanted. Like he wanted an apology. He wanted people to say
that fool wanted $27 million.
Well, I know. I get that too. But not getting apologies. So there was other ones that I read where like the system never apologized. Like nobody ever, they just kind of like kick him out. There's no rehabilitation after 20 something years. They don't give him programs on how to adjust. They don't.
No, because he's not guilty now. So no, he's now and that's the other problem there is because I'll tell you right now, it doesn't matter how long you spend in there, it changes you.
Right. And there's no help for people.
It's hard to
14 years, 7 years. I mean, if you served 7 years and you got out, what are you going to do? And that's the thing is they're basically saying like, okay, you're free. And that's supposed to be a gift enough. And so that's where I feel like there should be something else in place to be able to help.
There need to be programs. 100%. There need to be programs.
Therapy, something.
Yeah. There need to be programs that help. I mean, I don't necessarily agree that they need to put them like in a halfway house because if they weren't a danger to society to begin with, they probably aren't coming out of there. But what's different is when you come out of there, the world doesn't do math the same way as when you're in jail or prison.
Well, and there are a lot that will end up doing another crime because it's just the mentality.
It's all they know.
Mm-hmm. And they didn't have that rehabilitation or that help when they got out.
Right.
So, I mean, then there were other stories where a guy was in there for like 30 years and he got out and was a huge part of his adult children's life and ended up marrying his kid's mom after he got out. So, I mean, there's other stories too that are positive,
right?
But there are some that their whole life is completely
screwed,
done,
right?
Even if they don't have a record anymore, they still have a hard time with jobs because now they're 40 something years old
with
they have no
training,
job history.
No job history.
How do you explain that at 44 years old? Like, what did you do? Oh, I was wrongly convicted and in prison for the last 25 years. Okay, let me hire you. What do you, I mean, unless there's some skill, maybe a trade that was in prison. I'm talking about this like as if I know. Right. I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I just know what
hard. I read.
It is hard that like they just send them to the wolves. They open the gate, they let them walk out, and then they just walk away. Like that's tough.
My final point, and this is it. I'm like done after this for sure.
Okay.
But now I have to find the back of a paper that I wrote on. Okay. Coincidentally.
Okay.
So definitely find the innocenceproject.org online for more information. But on April 15th on Netflix, they're actually coming out with a documentary. I don't know if it's a docuseries or just a documentary, but it's called The Innocence Files, and it's guilty until proven innocent.
Oh.
So it's
on Netflix?
Yeah, it's on Netflix.
Really?
April 15th. So I already set an alarm for it in my phone. And
did you add it to your list already?
Not yet, because I just saw it a little while
That's
ago.
Freaking awesome.
So April 15th, Netflix, Innocence Files, and it will give more information.
How weird is that? Huh. So, you didn't know that going into this?
No, I found it when I went to the innocenceproject.org page.
That's cool. The universe speaks in funny ways, doesn't it?
I know. It gives us something else to watch. So,
yeah.
I just have one more thing to add, but it has nothing to do with this.
Okay.
So if you're wrapping it up, let me know.
Yeah, no, that's it.
So we put a survey out, just kind of asking some kind of COVID questions, and we've had a really good response so far. And really interesting answers, different than what I think we were expecting. So if you could go on to the Smack Dad page, or I have it on my Facebook if you're on mine.
It's on mine.
Okay. So you can find the survey link and take the survey. It's 10 questions. It's super simple. It's anonymous. We're not going to judge you if you haven't showered in a week. So if you could do that, we're going to talk about the results probably on Monday. Do a little COVID update.
Yeah. And if you haven't already, you can share that survey So if you go to the page or either one of ours, you can actually share that survey so that we can get more people involved in the
higher number. Because the more people that are doing it, it's completely changing the results.
Right. So yeah,
it's pretty interesting.
Try to get that
whatever
spread around.
Saying.
Yeah, so. I'll work on getting it out too. I think I have some other things I can share too. We're on. So
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll help you out.
So
anyway, so we'll be back Monday. We'll probably be doing like a Q&A session again. And
keep it light. I think Mondays
and then we're doing that survey thing. So we'll get the results of that and some Q&A stuff.
Yep.
With y'all. Thanks for joining. We will see you
Monday.
I just said, how do I not remember that?
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Here I go breaking the microphone again.
Oh my God.